Hello, you are listening to ASMR Dreams, our official channel. Here we share calm stories and clear, soothing narration. Subscribe and leave a like, so every evening you can gently dive into a world of knowledge, mystery, and quiet wonder. Myths of Ancient Egypt. My dear listeners, today I invite you on a magical, peaceful, and deeply calming journey. We will travel through time and space, leaving behind the noise of the modern world, the restless cities, and the endless stream of thoughts. Allow yourself to relax. Make yourself comfortable. Close your eyes and take a slow, deep breath. With every exhale, imagine tension leaving your body, making space for softness, lightness, and calm. Tonight, we journey to ancient Egypt, a world filled with mysteries, majestic gods, and enchanted stories that have survived for thousands of years. Picture this land, thousands of years ago, where the burning sun meets endless sands and where life itself is given by a mighty river. People lived, loved, worked, and built their civilization, guided by faith in higher powers. Try to see it in your mind. Golden dunes stretching beyond the horizon, air shimmering in the heat, and the cool, dark waters of the Nile, flowing through the entire land like an artery of life. Along its banks, reeds whisper softly. Tall palm trees sway gently in the wind, and in the deep, endless blue sky, a falcon glides silently. Here, silence reigns, broken only by the sound of water and distant birdsong. This is a world of harmony, a world where humans did not separate themselves from nature, but felt like an inseparable part of it. For the ancient Egyptians, myths were not just beautiful stories or evening entertainment by the fire. They were the very essence of existence, a way to understand how this vast and complex world works. Myths answered the most important questions. Why does dawn ignite in the east every morning? Why do the waters of the Nile rise and fall, bringing fertility? What happens to the soul when the earthly journey ends? And why is it so important to maintain order and truth in every action? The entire surrounding world was perceived as a great divine theater. Every day, in the heavens and on earth, a grand drama unfolded, an eternal struggle between light and darkness, between order and chaos, between creation and destruction. And in these stories, the gods were not distant, unreachable beings, coldly observing humanity from the clouds. No, they were here, close. They were powerful protectors, wise teachers, strict judges, and sometimes even companions. They lived in every breath of wind, in every ray of sunlight, in every ear of wheat. When an Egyptian raised their eyes to the sky and saw the blinding solar disk, they did not see just a celestial body. They saw the great god Ra, king of the gods, sailing across the heavenly ocean in his golden solar boat, bringing life to everything that exists. And when night descended upon the land, bringing coolness and scattering countless stars across the sky, people knew this was not just darkness. It was the time of a great battle, a time when the sun fought the forces of chaos, so that by morning it could triumph once again and return light to the world. This belief filled life with meaning. Myths explained not only terrifying natural phenomena, but also simple human rules. They taught people how to live in harmony with one another and with the world around them, how to respect elders, how to honor the gods, how to care for loved ones, and why it is so important to maintain order within one's own soul. Egyptian mythology became the foundation upon which everything rested, from the life of a simple farming family to the governance of a vast and powerful state led by the pharaoh. Now we begin our immersion. Breathe evenly. Breathe calmly. Let the images of ancient Egypt gently wrap around your consciousness, carrying you into a world of dreams and legends. Before we witness the birth of the gods and the creation of the world, we must understand the invisible laws that made this world possible. There were two concepts at the heart of the Egyptian worldview, the very breath of the universe itself. These concepts were Mat and Isfit. Imagine a perfectly tuned musical instrument. Every string tightened just right. Every note pure and clear. From this balance, harmony is born. For the ancient Egyptians, this harmony was Mat. Mat is often translated as order, truth, or justice. But its meaning is far deeper and wider. Mat is not simply a set of rules or laws. It is a state of being, a condition in which the world exists in perfect balance. It is an invisible golden thread, connecting everything that exists, from the movement of distant stars to the quiet beating of the human heart. Mat is what makes the sun rise every morning at the proper time. It is what causes the great Nile to flood each year, nourishing the dry land and giving people food. It is the foundation of existence itself. The ancient Egyptians believed that without Mat, the world would crumble into dust. There would be no life, no light, no time itself. Mat was the divine design that transformed chaos into cosmos, confusion into order. In art, Mat was often depicted as a graceful woman with an ostrich feather on her head. This feather, the feather of truth, symbolized lightness and purity. It reminded people that truth should not be a heavy burden. Truth is light, natural, and essential, like air. To live according to Mat meant to live in harmony with the world and with oneself, to speak honestly, not to take what does not belong to you, to help the weak, to maintain order in your home and in your heart. The Egyptians believed the world functioned like a vast, complex, yet perfect mechanism. Rivers flow where they should. Seeds sprout from the earth. Seasons follow one another. And humanity's task was not to disrupt this order, but to support it. But where there is light, there is always shadow. Where there is order, there is always the possibility of disorder. The complete opposite of Mat was Isfit. Isfit is chaos, darkness, falsehood, destruction, disharmony. If Mat is the calm, majestic flow of a river, Isfit is a violent, unpredictable flood that sweeps away homes and destroys crops. Isfit embodied everything people feared most: famine, disease, war, natural disasters. It was the force of decay, always waiting at the threshold, ready to break into the world if gods and humans relaxed their vigilance. For an Egyptian, the world was not something guaranteed forever. It was a fragile island of order, surrounded by an ocean of chaos. Isfit was always near. It hid in the wild deserts surrounding the fertile Nile Valley. It lurked in the darkness of moonless nights. It whispered through malicious thoughts and unjust actions. The relationship between Mat and Isfit was not a battle that would one day end. It was eternal, ongoing, a dynamic balance. Just as day replaces night, order must constantly be restored. The Egyptians did not believe chaos could be destroyed forever. They wisely understood that disorder is part of nature, but they believed it could and must be restrained. Every day was a small victory of Mat over Isfit. Every sunrise confirmed that order had triumphed once again, and everyone took part in this cosmic work. The gods fought monsters of darkness in the heavens. Pharaohs performed rituals in temples to strengthen the gods, and ordinary people lived honestly and performed good deeds. Imagine this responsibility. Every action you take, every word you speak, all of it matters to the balance of the entire universe. If you speak the truth, you strengthen Mat. You make the world more solid, brighter, and safer. But if you lie or commit acts of cruelty, you allow a small fragment of Isfit to enter the world. You let a crack in the fabric of chaos widen just a little more. This profound philosophical idea united the people of Egypt. They felt themselves to be co-creators of the world, guardians of balance. Even the pharaohs, those believed to be living gods, earthly embodiments of divine power, were not above the law of Mat. On the contrary, the greatest responsibility rested upon them. The primary duty of a ruler was to create Mat, to uphold justice and order within the land, to protect the country from enemies, and to ensure prosperity. If famine or unrest arose, it was seen as a sign that Mat had been disturbed, that Isfet had gained the upper hand for a time. This struggle was eternal. This dance between order and chaos, between light and shadow, creates the tension that we call life. A static, frozen world would be lifeless. A living world requires constant effort, constant renewal, and gentle vigilance. Now that you can feel this fundamental duality, now that you understand how the ancient Egyptians saw the world, as a space where harmony must be continuously maintained, we can journey even deeper. Let us imagine a time when there was no Mat and no Isfet, no gods, no humans, no land, no sky. A time when nothing existed at all except an endless, dark, sleeping potential. We travel now to the very beginning, to the place where everything was born, to the great and mysterious None. Let us try something extraordinary. Close your eyes and allow your imagination to erase every image of the world you know. Cities dissolve, forests fade away, mountains and rivers disappear, the sun dims, the stars vanish. Even the sky itself dissolves. There is no up, no down, no yesterday, no tomorrow. There is not even air to breathe. Only silence remains. Deep, velvety, absolute silence. And this darkness is not an empty, cold void. It is more like a state of eternal, peaceful sleep. The ancient Egyptians called this state None. None is the primordial ocean, a boundless, bottomless abyss of water that existed before time itself. Imagine water that does not flow, does not ripple, does not move. It simply is. It fills all space. It stretches infinitely in every direction. This was the great abyss, filled with hidden energy. For people whose lives depended entirely on the Nile, water was the most powerful and understandable symbol. Water gives life, but water can also be overwhelming and immense. Water has no fixed form. It becomes the shape of whatever contains it. But None had no shores, no bottom, no limits. It was pure chaos, but not the destructive chaos of Isfet. This was chaos of potential, chaos of possibility. Within the dark waters of None, everything that would ever exist was already present, dissolved and sleeping. Future gods slumbered there. The souls of humans rested there. The shapes of trees, the glow of stars, the rhythm of life itself, all of it mixed together, waiting for the moment of awakening. None was like an enormous seed containing the entire universe within it, or like a cosmic womb holding the secret of all future life. The Egyptians regarded None with sacred reverence. It was the most ancient of all beings. None was not born. It was not created. It simply always existed. It was the beginning of everything, and in a sense, the end of everything. And it is important to understand this. When the world was created, None did not disappear. It did not fade away. It was merely pushed back to the boundaries of creation. Imagine our world as a delicate bubble of air floating within an infinite dark ocean. The Egyptians believed that None surrounds the earth on all sides. It exists far above the dome of the sky, and that is why the sky appears blue, as if the waters of the great ocean shimmer through the air. None also exists deep beneath the earth in unexplored depths. From there, they believed, the great Nile emerges, rising from hidden underground caverns to bring life to Egypt. And every evening, the sun descends into these dark waters. beginning its nightly journey through the underworld. Nun reminds us that our orderly, familiar world is only a small island of light surrounded by infinite mystery. This sense of the abyss is always nearby. But tonight, for our calm and comfort, let us perceive Nun as an image of absolute rest. Imagine yourself gently sinking into these warm, dark, weightless waters. Here, there are no worries, because there are no events. There is no anxiety, because there is no time. You are held by eternity itself. This is the kind of peace found only in the deepest, dreamless sleep. You simply are, dissolved within the great ocean of beginnings. In the waters of Nun, there is no movement, but there is anticipation. The silence here is so dense that it can almost be heard. It is the silence before the first sound, the darkness before the first ray of light. And then, somewhere in the deepest depths, something begins to change. The waters of Nun, which had slept for countless ages, feel a faint vibration. A will to exist begins to gather in one place. Chaos prepares to give birth to order. Sleep prepares to become reality. We are about to witness the greatest miracle. From the dark waters, the first solid form rises. The first sense of I am appears. We enter now the story of the first God and the first hill from which the history of the universe began. Adam and the sacred stone Benben. Within the infinite, dreaming darkness of Nun, something occurred that changed everything forever. Deep within the ocean, where eternal stillness reigned, the first spark of will was born. It was not an external voice, not a guiding hand. It was the universe itself deciding to awaken. The waters trembled. Slowly, overcoming the weight of non-existence, something solid began to rise from the depths. The surface of the ocean parted, and above the dark waters, the peak of the first hill emerged. The ancient Egyptians called this primordial mound Benben. Picture it, an endless black ocean stretching in all directions, and in its center, a single island of land. This was the first piece of solid reality within a world of flowing chaos. Benben became the point of support, the foundation upon which the entire architecture of existence was built. It was not merely earth or sand. It glowed. As it rose from the waters, it caught the very first light, a light it had helped bring into being. It resembled a golden pyramid, shining in the heart of darkness. This image, the hill rising from water toward the sun, inspired the Egyptians to build their great pyramids. Every pyramid, every obelisk reaching toward the sky, was a stone remembrance of that first sacred hill. The tips of obelisks were often covered in gold, so that, like Benben itself, they would be the first to catch the rays of the rising sun, announcing the victory of life over darkness. But the hill was only the stage. At the very moment when solid ground separated from water, the Creator appeared upon its peak. His name was Adam. Adam is a unique figure in Egyptian mythology. He had no parents, no mother who carried him. The Egyptians called him Khepri, the one who came into being by himself. Adam created himself through the force of his own thought and will. He gathered his essence from the chaos of Nun and shaped it into form. Imagine him standing upon the shining peak of Benben. He is the only living being in the entire universe. Around him, only silence and water. He was completely alone. And yet, in this solitude, there was no sorrow. Within him lived the fullness of all that exists. Adam was everything and nothing at the same time. He carried within himself the potential of all future gods, all humans, all animals and plants. He was a condensed spark of pure creative energy. In this moment, Adam was both male and female, father and mother. He was a perfect, self-sufficient whole. Standing upon solid ground, Adam gazed across the endless horizon. He inhaled the very first breath, a breath that had not existed a moment before. He felt beneath his feet the firmness of stone. He became the first point of reference in space. Before his appearance, there was no here or there, no near or far. But with Adam standing upon the sacred hill of Benben, the world gained a center. The heart of the universe began to beat. For the ancient Egyptians, the image of the first hill was not only a myth, it was a symbol of hope. Each year, the Nile overflowed its banks, flooding the valley and turning Egypt into a reflection of the primeval ocean, Nun. And each year, as the waters withdrew, small hills of fertile black soil emerged once again, ready for sowing. For a farmer, this was a yearly repetition of the miracle of creation itself. Land rising from beneath water meant that life continued. Chaos had retreated. Order had returned. Adam upon the hill of Benben became a symbol of form, triumphing over formlessness. A reminder that even in the deepest darkness, firm ground can be found. This was a moment of immense concentration. All the power of the universe gathered into a single point, ready to burst into a firework of life. But Adam understood something essential. To be alone, even all-powerful, was not enough. For the world to become living, complex, and beautiful, there had to be movement, there had to be interaction, there had to be division. The one had to become the many. Standing at the summit of the world, Adam prepared to take the next step, to breathe life out of himself, to break his solitude and gift the universe with breath and moisture. Thus begins the story of the first divine pair. Children born not through birth, but through breath. We move now into the story of Shu and Tefnut. Standing upon the shining hill of Benben, Adam realized a simple truth. He was perfect. He was complete, but he was alone. And so the great Creator decided to perform an act that would forever change the structure of existence. He chose to divide himself, to create the other. Adam gathered all of his life force. He took a deep breath, the very first breath in history, and exhaled with tremendous power. From this divine exhalation, from the very depths of the Creator, a stream of energy burst forth and took form. Thus, Shu was born. Shu became the god of air. Imagine this moment. Until now, space had been dense and motionless. And suddenly, for the first time, a breeze passed through the universe. It was not a storm. It was a gentle, living breath. Shu filled the emptiness. He became the space between things, the invisible volume in which life is possible. Shu is the atmosphere itself, the very air you are breathing right now. The Egyptians imagined him as a god always in motion, calm and omnipresent. With the appearance of Shu, the world ceased to be a compressed point. Space was born. There was now room to take a step, to straighten one's shoulders, to look into the distance. Shu became the first principle of life, a force unseen, yet without which everything falls still. But air cannot exist alone. It needs a partner. It needs balance. And so, after Shu, Adam released a second essence from within himself. Thus, Tefnut came into being. Tefnut became the goddess of moisture. If Shu was dry and light, Tefnut was fluid, nourishing, and cool. She became the first dew, the first mist, the first rain. Imagine the gentle chill of early morning, when the air is filled with freshness. That is the presence of Tefnut. Together, Shu and Tefnut formed the first pair, the first harmony of opposites, male and female, air and water, dryness and moisture. They circled around their father, Adam, in the first dance of existence. Now there were three. Loneliness had ended forever. This was a moment of profound tenderness. Adam looked upon his children and saw himself continued, yet independent. Shu gave the ability to breathe. Tefnut gave the ability to drink, to grow, to live. They became the foundation of the physical world we know. Without air and water, life is impossible. And the Egyptians placed these elements wisely at the very beginning of creation. There is a touching legend connected to their birth. Soon after their appearance, the young Shu and Tefnut, full of curiosity, ventured into the dark waters of Nun that still surrounded the primeval hill. They traveled so far into the darkness that they became lost. Adam remained alone on the hill of Benden. His heart tightened with fear. He feared that chaos would consume his children, that they would dissolve into the abyss. Then Adam removed his single eye, his divine, all-seeing eye, radiant like the sun, and sent it to search for them. For a long time, the eye wandered through the darkness, illuminating the frightening depths of Nun. And at last, it found them. The eye led Shu and Tefnut back to their father. When Adam saw his children returning from the darkness, alive and unharmed, he was overwhelmed with emotion. The great God wept. His tears fell upon the ground of the hill Benben. And according to the myth, from these tears of joy, the first humans were born. We, according to Egyptian belief, are the tears of divine happiness, the tears of a God reunited with his children. This gives humanity a special nature. We are born not from clay or dust, but from pure divine emotion, from love and relief. Shu and Tefnut grew and became inseparable. They understood that their purpose was to continue creation. Air and moisture embraced. And from their union, the next generation of gods was born, completing the physical stage of our world. They were destined to become the parents of earth and sky. Now imagine the scene. The endless ocean, the shining hill, and upon it 3 figures. Around them, an atmosphere begins to form, filled with fresh wind and life-giving mist. The world is ready to receive a floor and a ceiling. The world is ready for the birth of Geb and Nut. In this young world, where wind already stirred and fog curled softly, Shu and Tefnut gave birth to their children. They were Geb and Nut. If their parents were the elements of air and water, these two became the very body of the world itself. Geb became the god of earth. Nut became the goddess of the sky. Egyptian mythology holds a remarkable distinction. Where many cultures speak of Mother Earth and Father Sky, Egypt reversed this image. The earth was male, solid, reliable, fertile. The sky was female, a beautiful, star-covered woman who arches above and protects the world. In the beginning of time, Geb and Nut loved each other so deeply that they never wished to be apart. They lay locked in an eternal embrace. The sky rested upon the earth. They were entwined like lovers who had forgotten everything else. It was beautiful, but there was no room for anything beyond them. Between the tightly pressed earth and sky, there was no space, only darkness. No plants, no animals, no people could exist there. The world was closed in upon itself. Then their father, Shu, the god of air, understood that he must intervene. He had to perform an act that might seem cruel, but was necessary for life to be born. Shu stepped between the lovers. He pressed his feet firmly against the solid body of Geb, and with his hands he gently lifted the beautiful Nut. Imagine this titanic, slow ascent. Shu straightened his mighty shoulders and raised the sky higher and higher until it arched far above the world. He became the space itself, the atmosphere that would forever separate earth and sky, and thus the universe was born in the form we know today. Now, with your inner gaze, look at this majestic image. Below, stretched wide, lies Geb. His body is the valleys and deserts of Egypt. His bent knees became mountains, and his green garments turned into fields and forests. Geb is the foundation beneath our feet. He is calm and patient. Sometimes he laughs, and then earthquakes happen. But more often, he gently grows grain, feeding all who live upon him. And high above him, arched like a great curve, stretches Nut. She touches the earth only with the tips of her fingers and toes at the far horizon, where east and west, north and south meet the land. Her body is the vault of the heavens. By day, It is blue and transparent, like the waters of the primeval ocean. And by night, Nut puts on her most beautiful dress, embroidered with thousands of shining stars. The Egyptians believed that the Milky Way was the spine of the goddess, the glowing axis of the world. Despite their separation, Geb and Nut never stopped loving each other. They gaze at one another through the transparent body of their father, Shu. The rain that falls from the sky is the tears of longing Nut, falling upon the face of her beloved, nourishing him and giving him the strength to give birth to life. Nut became more than just the sky. She became the great mother and the protector. She is the boundary between our ordered world and the infinite chaos of the outer darkness. Every night, she performs a great mystery. Legend says that each evening at sunset, Nut swallows the sun. Ra, weary from his daily journey, disappears into her mouth. This is what we see as the coming of twilight. All night long, the sun travels within her star-filled body, passing through secret regions unseen by the human eye. And every morning at dawn, Nut gives birth to the sun once more in the east. The red glow of sunrise is the color of her birth blood, the color of life renewed. This eternal cycle of swallowing and rebirth told the Egyptians that there is no true death. There is only temporary disappearance and the inevitable return of light. Nut was often depicted on the inner side of sarcophagus lids. The deceased seemed to fall into her embrace. It was a prayer. "O Nut, stretch yourself above me. Receive me into your starry body, so that I may be reborn like the sun." For an Egyptian, to look at the sky was to see a promise of eternal life. Now we have earth beneath our feet. We have sky above our heads. We have air to breathe. The stage is ready. The scenery is set. This world, created through love and separation, now needs rules. It needs a law that will hold the stars in place and guide the rivers along their paths. The world is ready to receive its greatest guardian. We return to the concept we began with, but now we will see it as a living goddess. We move into the story of the embodiment of truth, into the story of Maat. The world had been created. Earth lay below, sky stretched above, and air flowed between them. But this young, newly born world was like a vast, complex mechanism standing still, waiting for its first movement. It lacked rhythm. It lacked a law to guide the flow of time. And then Maat entered the world. We have already spoken of her as the great principle of order opposed to chaos. But for the Egyptians, she was not merely an idea. She was a living, breathing goddess, the daughter of the sun god Re. If Re was the power and energy of creation, then Maat was his consciousness, his meaning, his path. Imagine her, a beautiful woman, kneeling in a posture of absolute calm, her knees drawn close to her chest, her hands resting gently upon them. She makes no sudden movements. She herself is stability. Upon her head, secured by a red ribbon, stands a single ostrich feather. This feather is one of the most beautiful and profound symbols of ancient Egypt. Why an ostrich feather? Look at the feather of almost any other bird. One side is usually wider than the other, but the ostrich feather is perfectly symmetrical. Its shaft divides it into two equal halves. This is the symbol of balance, the symbol that truth cannot lean to one side or the other. It is straight, even, and flawless. Maat was the breath by which the gods themselves lived. Ancient texts say that the gods live on Maat, feed on Maat, and drink Maat. This meant that even the highest divine beings could not exist without order and justice. Chaos is destructive, even for the immortal. Maat played an especially important role in the daily journey of the sun. Imagine the golden solar bark of Ra sailing across the heavenly ocean. This is not a leisurely voyage. It is a dangerous mission to sustain life in the universe. And who stands at the prow of this boat? Who points the way? Maat. She is the navigator of the solar ship. She charts the course through darkness and danger. She disperses the clouds of uncertainty, making the sun's path straight and clear. Because of her, Re knows where to sail. Because of her, dawn arrives. Because of her, the world does not lose its way. For ordinary people, the presence of Mat brought an immense sense of peace. In a world where life was harsh, where drought or flood could destroy everything, faith in Mat became an anchor. People knew, if they lived honestly, if they respected tradition, they were woven into the cosmic order. Their lives were not random. They were part of a great harmony. The pharaohs, rulers of Egypt, began each day with a ritual offering to Mat. Imagine the king entering the dark, cool sanctuary of a temple. In his hands, he holds a small statue of the goddess with the feather. He offers it to the god statue, as if saying, I return to you the order you granted me. In my land there is peace. The courts are just. The temples are pure. The people are fed. Chaos has not entered. This was a sacred exchange. The gods gave life and energy, and humans, through the pharaoh, returned order and harmony. Mat was a quiet goddess. No loud myths of battles and passions were told about her, as they were about Isis or Osiris. Yet she was present in every myth as its invisible foundation. When the gods argued, they turned to the law of Mat. When a person died, they were judged by the law of Mat. She was the air that Egyptian culture breathed. Now, feel this state within yourself. Mat is the absence of anxiety. It is the certainty that tomorrow the sun will rise again. It is the knowledge that everything has its place and its time. It is deep inner balance when your conscience is clear and your heart is light, like that very feather. But as we know, balance must be protected. The idyllic image of the sailing bark and the wise goddess at its prow would be incomplete without what hides in the shadows. The path of order passes through territories of chaos. And every day and every night, this calm is tested. The solar bark continues its journey. Ahead lies the darkest place in the universe. There, in the depths, coils an enemy whose name made Egyptians shudder. We move into the story of the great cosmic battle that repeats every night. We move into the confrontation between Ra and Apophis. And now, the day draws to a close. Look to the west. The sky fills with crimson and violet hues. This is the moment of transition. The great god Ra, the shining ruler of the world, completes his daily journey. The Egyptians believed that Ra traveled on two different boats. By day, he sailed upon the Manjet, the boat of eternity, light and golden, gliding across the blue heavenly ocean. But as soon as the solar disk touches the horizon, Re boards another vessel. Its name is Mesektet, the boat of night. Imagine how the atmosphere changes. The light grows dimmer. Shadows stretch and soften. The bark of Mesektet no longer glides through the air. It descends, slowly sinking into the underground waters, into the world of Duat, the realm of the dead and of hidden mysteries. There are no familiar stars here. Another river flows in this place, black, deep, and silent. Its surface does not shimmer. It absorbs light. Aboard the night bark gathers the entire retinue of the sun god. Here is the wise Mat, here is Thoth, the god of knowledge and sacred words, and other divine guardians. All of them are alert. They know that every night, in the deepest hour, when the world above sleeps, they must face absolute evil. Deep within the underworld, where darkness thickens and silence becomes heavy, dwells Apophis. Apophis is not merely a monster. He is a colossal serpent, his coils endless, his body older than fear itself. He is the embodiment of Isfet, that very chaos that longs to devour the world. Apophis hates the light. He hates order. His single purpose is to stop the movement of the solar bark. If the bark were to stop, time would freeze, and the world would collapse back into the primordial ocean of none. This battle repeats every night, for billions of years. Apophis does not attack with swords or claws. His weapons are far more terrifying. He uses his hypnotic gaze and the magic of his voice. Legends say that Apophis drinks the waters of the underworld river so that the bark has nothing to sail upon. He creates sandbanks of darkness to run the vessel aground. His hissing is a sound that chills the blood, a sound that tries to drown out life itself. But Ra is not defenseless. At the prow of his bark stands the most unexpected protector, the god Set. In other myths, Set is known as a god of rage, a murderer, a bringer of chaos. But here, aboard the bark of millions of years, his fury serves the light. Set is the only one who can look into the eyes of Apophis and not turn to stone. He stands with a spear in his hand, ready to repel any strike of darkness. This battle is immense, yet it unfolds in the silence of the underworld. It is a battle of will. Apophis tries to cast a spell of numbness, to lull the gods into surrender, to dissolve them into nothingness. Ra and his companions oppose him with the light of consciousness and the magic of creation. Other gods recite spells to bind the serpent's movements. The great cat, sometimes the goddess Bastet herself, steps forward, using her claws to sever the head of darkness. They cut through the void, returning flow to the waters. And every night, a miracle happens. Re triumphs. The serpent Apophis is defeated. His body is cut apart, his hypnosis shattered. The waters return to their course, and the bark of Mesektet continues its majestic journey toward the eastern gates of the horizon. For the Egyptian, this myth was a source of immense strength. When a person awoke in the morning and saw the rising sun, they knew the battle had been won. Light had defeated darkness once more. Good had proven stronger than evil. The very fact of a new day was proof that chaos could be overcome. Apophis never dies completely. He is eternal. Just like Rhea himself, he reforms, returning again the next night. But this did not frighten the Egyptians. It taught them resilience. Life is a cycle. You cannot defeat your fears once and for all, but you can defeat them every morning. You can rise, see the light, and continue your path, knowing that even the gods fight so that this world may exist. The red color of dawn, seen just before sunrise, the Egyptians poetically called the blood of the defeated Apophis. It is a banner of victory that the sky raises each morning, greeting the return of its king. Thus, in an eternal cycle, the life of the universe is preserved. But while the sun completes its heavenly journey, another drama unfolds on earth, a story that became the most beloved, the most human, and the most tragic myth of ancient Egypt, a story of love, betrayal, death, and resurrection. We leave the celestial bark and step onto solid ground to learn the fate of the great Osiris, his faithful wife Isis, and his treacherous brother Set. While Ra fought darkness in the heavens and the underworld, along the banks of the Nile, a tale was unfolding that touched Egyptian hearts more deeply than any other. This is the legend of a time when gods lived among humans, and Egypt was ruled by a wise and just king, Osiris. Imagine a golden age. In those days, the land was incredibly fertile. The Nile flooded just enough to nourish the fields without destroying homes. Gardens bore abundant fruit. People knew neither war nor hunger. This world was ruled by Osiris. He was not merely a ruler. He was a teacher. He taught people agriculture, how to plow the land, how to sow grain, and how to harvest crops. He gave them laws, taught them to honor the gods and live in peace with one another. Osiris was the living embodiment of Mat, order and goodness. Beside him on the throne sat his sister and wife, the beautiful Isis. If Osiris was strength and law, Isis was wisdom and magic. She knew the secret names of all things. She could heal illnesses and protect families. Their love was perfect, and it seemed that Egypt's happiness would last forever. But as we already know, light cannot exist without shadow. Osiris had a brother named Set. Set was the god of the desert, of raging sandstorms and foreign lands. He was red-haired, strong, and untamed, and envy settled in his heart. Set looked at his brother's green fields, at the love the people gave Osiris, and the darkness within him grew. He did not want to live in the shadows. He wanted to rule. And so, Set devised a cunning plan. One day, Set held a magnificent feast. He invited many guests, and of course, Osiris himself. At the height of the celebration, Set's servants carried into the hall a magnificent chest. It was made of precious wood, decorated with gold, ivory, and gemstones. Everyone gasped in admiration. Set smiled and announced, "This marvelous chest shall belong to the one to whom it fits perfectly." Laughing, the guests lay inside one by one. For some, it was too large. For others, too small. It was a trap, calculated for one person only. When Osiris's turn came, he calmly lay inside. It fit him perfectly. In that instant, laughter turned into horror. Set and his accomplices slammed the heavy lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and cast the chest into the waters of the Nile. The current seized it and carried it away into the unknown. The golden age was over. Set seized the throne. In place of harmony and order, storm and fear came to the land. But Isis did not submit. Her grief was boundless, but her love was stronger than death. She cut off her beautiful hair as a sign of mourning and went in search of her husband. She wandered through marshes and deserts, asking people and children if they had seen a floating chest. After long and dangerous journeys, she found the body of Osiris, far beyond Egypt's borders, and secretly returned it home. Hiding it in the dense reeds of the Nile Delta, hope seemed to return. But evil does not sleep. Set, hunting at night by moonlight, accidentally discovered Isis's hiding place. When he saw the body of his hated brother, rage consumed him. Set tore Osiris's body into many pieces. Legends speak of 14 or 42 parts, and scattered them across all of Egypt, so that he could never be made whole again. Imagine Isis's despair. All seemed lost, but once again she did not surrender. Together with her sister Nephthys, she transformed into a morning bird and set out once more. With her wings she searched sand and water, gathering her beloved piece by piece. In every place where she found a fragment of Osiris, she built a tomb to confuse Set. At last, all the parts were gathered. And then Isis performed the greatest act of magic ever achieved in the universe. She joined the pieces together, wrapped them in linen cloth, and infused them with fragrant oils. Thus, the first mummy was created. Isis transformed herself into a falcon. She hovered above the body of her husband, and with the slow, powerful movement of her wings, she created a magical wind. This wind carried breath. It carried memory. It carried love, and it breathed life into Osiris. This was not a full resurrection. He could not return to the world of the living as a king. But that single moment was enough. Osiris opened his eyes. In that brief instant where life and death touched, Isis conceived a son from him, the falcon god Horus, destined to avenge his father. Osiris, whose body was preserved but whose soul now belonged to another realm, departed. He descended into Duat, the underground kingdom. There, he became the lord of the dead. No longer did he rule fields and harvests on earth. Now he ruled eternity. He became hope for every Egyptian, the promise that death is not disappearance, but a transition into another kingdom, ruled by a just and benevolent king. The story of Osiris and Isis taught the Egyptians the most important truth of all. Love conquers death. Even what is torn apart can be gathered again. Even what is killed can live on in a new form. And while Isis hid in the marshes, raising the young Horus, and while Osiris established his new realm beneath the earth, humankind needed to understand something essential. How does one reach him? How does one pass from earthly life into eternity? Here, onto the stage, steps a mysterious and silent god, with the head of a jackal, the one who first touched the body of Osiris, the one who created the science of preserving life. We move to the story of Anubis and the sacred mystery of embalming. When Isis performed her great act of magic and breathed life into Osiris, another god stood beside her, a god who always remained in the shadows, yet whose role was indispensable for eternal life. This was Anubis. You have surely seen his image, a man with the head of a jackal, or a black jackal lying atop a chest. In the modern world, this image may seem frightening, but for the ancient Egyptian, Anubis was the most reliable protector. He was a guardian god, the patron of necropolises, and the great master of embalming. Why a jackal? Egyptians often saw these animals at the edge of the desert, wandering among tombs. And ancient wisdom chose to turn a potential threat into a protector. The one who walks the paths of the dead knows best how to guard them. Anubis was depicted in jet black, but this was not the color of mourning or evil. In Egypt, black was the color of fertile Nile soil, the color of silt that gives life, which means Anubis was a god of rebirth. It was Anubis who helped Isis wrap the body of Osiris. He became the first embalmer in history. With careful, skillful hands, he transformed the mortal body of the king into an eternal, incorruptible monument. In doing so, he established a ritual that Egyptians would repeat for thousands of years, believing that if everything was done correctly, death itself could be overcome. Imagine a place called the Wabit, the pure place, a tent or special chamber where the priests of Anubis worked. Absolute silence reigned there, broken only by the rustle of linen and whispered prayers. The air was thick and fragrant, saturated with cedar, myrrh, juniper, and incense. These aromas were not merely practical, they were sacred. The Egyptians believed that fragrance was the sweat of the gods, and by saturating the body with it, they made a human being divine. The process of mummification was long. It lasted 70 days, exactly the same length of time that the star Sirius disappears from the sky before its rising. This was a time of transformation. The body of the deceased was washed with the waters of the Nile, symbolically cleansing it of earthly burdens. Then it was dried with natron, a natural salt from desert lakes. Moisture left the body, and it became pure and preserved, like the desert itself. Anubis, or a priest wearing his mask, guided every step. The most important stage was the wrapping. Imagine hundreds of meters of the finest linen. Priests wrapped every finger, every limb, every part of the body with extraordinary care. This was not simple wrapping. It was the creation of a cocoon. Between the layers of bandages, they placed precious amulets, gold, faience, stone figures of gods, a scarab over the heart, necklaces around the neck, protective symbols on the wrists. Each amulet was accompanied by a spell. This was magical armor. Anubis knew that the path to the afterlife was full of dangers, and he armed the soul for the journey, turning the body itself into a magical artifact. It was an art of love and memory. The Egyptians believed that the soul called Ba, depicted as a bird with a human head, needed a place to return to. The mummy was the soul's home. If the body was preserved, then the person's identity, their true self, would never vanish. When the work was complete, Anubis performed the final sacred ritual, the opening of the mouth. He touched the face of the mummy with a special instrument, symbolically restoring the ability to see, hear, speak, and breathe in the other world. This was no longer a dead body. It was Ak, a sacred luminous, ready for eternity. Anubis was a silent guide. At the moment when earthly eyes closed, he was the first the soul met on the other side. He did not frighten. He extended his hand. Imagine this scene. A tall, dark figure with the sensitive ears of a jackal takes you by the hand. His touch is cool and calming. He knows the road through darkness. He leads the soul through the labyrinths of Duat, past fiery lakes and strange beings, protecting it from all threats. His task is to bring the traveler to the most important trial of all, to the place where the fate of eternity is decided. The body is preserved. It rests quietly in its tomb, surrounded by objects the person loved. The scent of oil still lingers in the air, but the soul, guided by Anubis, enters the great hall of the two truths. There, at the far end of the hall, stand the scales, and upon the throne sits Osiris. The culmination of human life and death begins. We move to the story of the judgment of Osiris and the famous weighing of the heart. Anubis firmly holds the soul by the hand. They pass through immense gates and enter a hall whose grandeur cannot be described by words. This is the Hall of the Two Truths. Its ceiling rises so high that it disappears into darkness. Along the walls, in solemn silence, sit 42 judge gods. At the center, on a high throne, sits Osiris. His skin is green, like papyrus stems, like the waters of the renewing Nile. In his hands are the crook and the flail, symbols of authority and shepherd-like care. He is silent. In this hall, loud words are unnecessary. Thoughts are heard here. The soul stands at the center. The moment has come for which the Egyptian prepared their entire life. This is the negative confession. The soul does not beg for forgiveness. It declares its purity. Imagine the voice echoing in the vast silence. I did not commit evil against people. I did not torment animals. I did not steal bread from the poor. I did not block the waters during the flood. I was not the cause of tears. I am pure. I am pure. These were extraordinary words. The Egyptians believed that righteousness was not prayer alone, but the absence of harm to the world. To not block water meant allowing a neighbor to irrigate their field. To not cause tears meant to be kind, but words can lie. Only the heart knows the truth. At the center of the hall stand enormous golden scales, the scales of justice. Beside them stands Thoth, the wise god with the head of an ibis. In his hands are a palette and a reed pen. He is ready to record a verdict that can never be changed. Anubis approaches the scales. On one pan he places Mati, sometimes as a small statue, but more often as the light white ostrich feather, the feather of truth. On the other pan he places the heart of the human being. The Egyptians called the heart Eb. They believed that it was not the brain, but the heart, that housed reason, memory, conscience, and emotion. The heart remembered everything, every action, every kind word, every dark thought. If a person lived in harmony with Mat, if they did not carry the heavy weight of anger, envy, or lies within themselves, then their heart would be light. Imagine this moment of absolute silence. All the gods fix their gaze on the scales. Even the air seems to stop breathing. The pans sway up, down, and slowly, very slowly, they come to rest. The heart and the feather balance perfectly. They stand on the same level. Perfect equilibrium. This means the person lived their life correctly. They did not disturb the harmony of the universe. Thoth records the result. The heart is truthful. The soul leaves the hall of judgment purified. In the shadow beneath the scales sits a creature named Anet, the devourer. a lioness with the head of a crocodile and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She waits for those whose hearts are heavy with sin, ready to consume them. But for the Egyptian, the greatest fear was not Ammit herself, but what she represented. Non-existence, to disappear forever, to be erased from the memory of the world. That was the true terror. But we leave Ammit in her corner, because in our story, the heart is light. Osiris nods. The judgment is complete. Anubis releases the soul's hand, and now Horus, the radiant son of the sun, leads the righteous one toward the exit. The doors open wide, and a warm, brilliant light pours forth. Before the soul stretch the fields of Ayaru, the fields of reeds. This is the Egyptian paradise. But it is not clouds and harps. For the Egyptians, paradise was the perfect version of earthly life. Imagine Egypt, but where it is never unbearably hot. A gentle northern breeze always blows. The fields are endlessly green. The wheat grows taller than a human being. Rivers are full of fish. Gardens overflow with figs and grapes. In the fields of Ayaru, there is no illness, no old age, no exhausting labor. Work exists, but it brings only the joy of creation. Yet the greatest happiness awaiting the Egyptian is reunion. Among the green reeds stand those they loved and lost, parents, friends, beloved wives and husbands, even cherished household animals. This is a world of eternal celebration, eternal abundance, and eternal peace. A life lived according to Mat is rewarded with continuation, without fear, without pain. On this gentle note, we leave the realm of the dead. We have seen that at the end of the righteous path await light and rest. Now let us return to the world of the living, to a place where Egyptians, every single day, turn to the gods for protection and joy. We speak now of a goddess, whose image still brings us warmth and a smile, the guardian of the hearth. We speak of Bastet. The souls of the righteous rest peacefully in the fields of Ayaru. But while a person lived on earth, in ordinary daily life, they too needed protection. They needed a deity who guarded not kings and empires, but the simple home. And such a goddess existed, the most beloved, the closest, and perhaps the most graceful of all. This was Bastet. You surely know her image. A slender woman with the head of a cat, or simply a cat, sitting upright, tail wrapped around her paws, gazing at the world with mysterious eyes. But this image is more than animal worship. For the ancient Egyptian, the home was a fortress in a dangerous world. Beyond its walls lay the desert. In the darkness of night lurked snakes, scorpions, and rodents that threatened precious grain supplies. The cat was a living shield, a small, soft guardian that silently patrolled the house, destroying pests. The Egyptians admired how gentleness and lethal precision coexisted within this creature. Bastet embodied this dual nature. She was the goddess of joy, pleasure, love, fertility, and domestic comfort. Imagine a hot Egyptian afternoon. The sun floods the courtyard. In the shade of a vine, a cat sleeps, relaxed, purring. That sound, the sound of Bastet. A soft, vibrating hum that calms the nerves and drives away anxiety. The Egyptians believed Bastet granted people the ability to relax, to enjoy the moment, to find pleasure in simple things. Good food, music, the embrace of a loved one. She was often depicted holding a sistrum, a musical instrument, a metal rattle shaped like a loop with rods inside. When priestesses shook the sistrum, it produced a gentle, shimmering sound, like reeds whispering in the wind. This sound frightened away evil spirits and invited divine blessing. But Bastet was not only softness. She was a lioness who hid her claws without losing them. There is a beautiful legend that Bastet was the eye of Ra, his solar daughter. In wrath, she could become the fierce lioness Sekhmet, goddess of war and scorching heat. But when her fury subsided, she washed in the waters of the Nile and transformed back into the gentle cat Bastet. This reminded people, true femininity and kindness do not mean weakness. Bastet is gentle, as long as her children, the people of Egypt, are safe. But if danger enters the home, she fights with the fury of a mother. The center of her worship was the city of Bubastis in the Nile Delta. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt, described festivals in her honor with amazement. Imagine the scene. Thousands of boats glide along the Nile. They are decorated with flowers and ribbons. The air is filled with flute music and rhythmic clapping. People sing, laugh, drink wine, and dance. It is a celebration of life. Bastet did not demand harsh asceticism. On the contrary, she taught that joy itself is a form of prayer. To dance is to praise the goddess. To love is to serve her. Cats were sacred in Egypt. To harm a cat was a grave crime. If a cat died in a household, the entire family shaved their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. The cat's body was carefully mummified and buried in special tombs, so it could journey to its mistress Bastet and play forever in her sunlit halls. Bastet was also the patroness of women in childbirth. Amulets depicting a cat with kittens were worn around the neck, believed to protect both mother and child. In the context of our lecture, created for rest and sleep, the image of Bastet is especially important. She is the guardian of dreams. The Egyptians believed that during sleep the soul is vulnerable, and that Bastet stands watch over the sleeper, protecting them from nightmares. Feel this presence now. Imagine somewhere nearby, at the foot of the bed, or by a warm hearth, a soft, warm creature curled into a ball. You hear its steady, soothing purr. This is the sound of safety. The door is barred. The pests are gone. The fire burns evenly. Bastet gives us permission to release control. She reminds us that even the strongest hunter must rest. She teaches grace and the art of always landing on four paws, no matter what happens. But the joy of Bastet is domestic, gentle, and quiet. In the Egyptian pantheon, there was another goddess whose joy was cosmic. A goddess who embodied not just comfort, but love itself, the music of the heavenly spheres, and beauty that saves the world. We say farewell to the gentle cat, and lift our eyes to the sky to meet the golden goddess. We move on to the story of Hathor. If Bastet was the warmth of the household hearth, then Hathor was the radiance of the sun itself. She is the golden goddess, the embodiment of love, music, dance, joy, and motherhood. Her name means the house of Horus, for she was the celestial mother of the falcon god, the very sky in which he soared. Hathor is one of the most ancient and most complex goddesses of Egypt. She was depicted in many forms, sometimes as a beautiful woman adorned with exquisite jewelry, and sometimes as a sacred celestial cow. Do not let this image seem strange. For ancient peoples, the cow symbolized the purest, most selfless form of maternal love. Large, dark, gentle eyes framed by long lashes, filled only with patience and kindness. Her milk nourishes life itself. This was how the Egyptians saw Hathor, all-embracing, endlessly caring. Upon her head rests her crown, two graceful cow horns between which, like a child in a cradle, lies the shining solar disk. This is the symbol of light, carried carefully, tenderly, as only a mother can carry it. Hathor was the goddess of the joy of living. The Egyptians did not believe that piety required sadness. On the contrary, to be happy, to dress beautifully, to love, to sing, was to serve Hathor. In her temples, the most famous being the temple at Dendera, there was no silence. Music filled the air. Priestesses shook their sistrums. Menet necklaces chimed rhythmically against their chests. And this rhythm was believed to be the very heartbeat of the universe. Hathor was the patroness of all that is beautiful. Polished metal mirrors were her sacred symbol. When an Egyptian woman looked into a mirror, darkening her eyes with kohl, She believed that the goddess herself was gazing back at her from the reflection, granting her charm and allure. Hathor was also called the Lady of Turquoise. She protected the miners who extracted this sky-blue stone from the scorching deserts of Sinai. Even there, among burning rocks and exhausting labor, people sought her presence, believing she helped uncover beauty hidden within rough stone. But Hathor held another role, one deeply comforting and profoundly important. She was known as the Lady of the West and the Mistress of the Sycamore. Imagine the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Egyptians believed that the western desert, where the sun sets, marked the edge of the earth. And there, at that very edge, stood a vast sycamore tree. Its leaves were always green, its shade eternally cool. When a weary soul, just departed from the body, began its journey into the afterlife, it was exhausted, frightened, forced to cross burning sands. And then it would see the tree. From its trunk, or from within its leaves, Hathor would appear. She did not demand passwords. She did not judge. She extended a tray of food and a jug of cool, fresh water. "Drink," she said, without words. To accept water from the hands of Hathor meant to receive the right to eternal life. This was hospitality. The goddess welcomed the dead, not as a stern guardian, but as a gracious hostess greeting travelers after a long journey. She gave them shade. She gave them rest. This image, Hathor emerging from the branches of a tree, is one of the most soothing in all world mythology. It is a promise that at the end of the path, there is not emptiness, but care, that someone kind and radiant will come to meet us, to quench our thirst. The 7 Hathors, as her multiple manifestations were called, came to the cradle of every newborn child. Like fairy godmothers from a tale, they foretold the child's fate. And even if that fate was difficult, people believed that Hathor, the goddess of love, would always give the strength to walk the path with dignity and with joy. She taught humanity the art of celebration. Each year, during the flooding of the Nile, the statue of Hathor was carried from her temple onto a boat and taken upriver to the temple of her divine consort. It was a sacred meeting, a divine date. All of Egypt rejoiced. People drank wine. They danced along the riverbanks. And it seemed that during those days, there was no sorrow on earth. Hathor reminds us that life is meant to be enjoyed, that beauty is a divine force capable of healing souls, that love binds worlds together more powerfully than any magic. And while golden Hathor dances, filling the world with music, somewhere, in the quiet of libraries and scriptoria, there works another, one who records every sound, every thought, one who transforms the chaos of emotions into the ordered structure of words. We leave the noisy celebration and step into a cool hall of knowledge. Ahead of us awaits the wisest of the gods, the inventor of writing, magic, and the calendar. We move now to the story of Thoth. But before we meet him, our picture of the Egyptian cosmos must be complete. The Egyptian sky was crowded with stars, and the earth with gods, each responsible for a different aspect of existence. So we lift our gaze to the zenith to meet the one considered the true master of the Egyptian sky. This is Horus. In the myth of Osiris, we saw him as a child and as a young avenger. But Horus is far more than that. He is the great falcon god. The Egyptians imagined the sky as his vast outstretched wings, covering the earth with a protective dome. His right eye is the sun. His left eye is the moon. As Horus flies through the cosmos, his shimmering feathers create clouds and stars. Horus is the archetype of the victor. If Osiris is the king of the dead, then Horus is the king of the living. Every pharaoh considered himself a living Horus upon the throne. He represents vigilance, youth, justice, the force that holds the world together and prevents it from falling into chaos. His symbol The winged solar disk can be seen above temple entrances. It means, evil shall not pass beneath my wings. Horus teaches us to see the world from above, to perceive the whole picture, to remain watchful. Yet if Horus is the light of the heavens, then in the deep waters of the Nile dwelt another ancient and powerful force. This is Sobek, the god with the head of a crocodile. To us, the crocodile is a dangerous predator. To the Egyptian, it was the raw power of the river itself. Sobek embodies the fury of water, its fertility, and its untamed strength. He was worshipped to appease the elements. But Sobek was also a protector. It was believed that with his mighty jaws, he guarded the infant Horus among the papyrus reeds, shielding him from enemies. Sobek reminds us of the primal energy of nature, a force that cannot be tamed, but can be respected and lived alongside in harmony. In his temples, living crocodiles were kept, adorned with golden earrings and bracelets, seen as living manifestations of the god. And beside the waters of Sobek, another great god was always invisibly present, Amun. Amun began as a god of air and wind, but rose to become the king of the gods. His name means the hidden one. Amun is mystery itself. You do not see the wind, yet you feel it fill the sails and bend the trees. So too is Amun, present everywhere, yet unseen. Later, he merged with the sun god, becoming Amun-Ra, the supreme force that both shines in the sky and exists within every breath. Amun is a god of protection, a merciful father who hears the prayer even of the poorest person. His sacred animal, the ram with curling horns, symbolizes creative power. Now let us travel to the ancient capital of Memphis, to honor the God who created the world not with breath, not with hands, but with thought. This is Ptah. Ptah is the god of craftsmen, architects, and artists. He was depicted as a man wrapped in a tight-fitting garment, wearing a blue cap. The legends of Memphis tell us that Ptah created the world, with his heart, meaning thought, and with his tongue, meaning word. He conceived the universe in his mind and spoke the names of things, and the things came into being. Ptah teaches us that words are material, that thought is the beginning of all creation. And from the name of his temple, Hat-Kapatah, the house of the soul of Ptah, the Greeks formed the word Aegyptos, which became the Egypt we know today. And finally, we cannot fail to mention the goddess whose roar makes the desert tremble, yet whose power is able to heal any disease. This is Sekhmet. We spoke of Bastet, the gentle cat. Sekhmet is her fearsome sister, or rather, her fierce aspect. She is a woman with the head of a lioness, crowned with the blazing solar disk. Her name means the powerful one. Sekhmet is the scorching heat of the sun, a force that can burn, but can also destroy infection and illness. She was the goddess of war, marching before the pharaoh into battle, and at the same time the goddess of physicians. The priests of Sekhmet were the finest healers in all of Egypt. They understood a deep truth, that which can kill, poison, fire, fever in the right hands, can become medicine. Sekhmet teaches us to respect the power of fire and anger, not to suppress them, but to guide them toward protection and healing. This circle of gods, Horus in the heavens, Sobek in the waters, Amun in the wind, Ptah in thought, and Sekhmet in fire, reveals how complete and alive the world of the Egyptian truly was. There was no corner of nature, no emotion, no force, where a deity did not dwell. And while music and laughter echo through the temples of Hathor, we withdraw to a place where sacred silence reigns. Imagine a cool hall with towering columns, the air scented with dry papyrus, aged wood, and ink. Here, by the flickering light of an oil lamp, works the one who knows everything. We speak now of Thoth. The Egyptians called him Jehudi. He is the god of wisdom, knowledge, magic, and most importantly, the inventor of writing. If the creators shaped the world physically, Thoth gave it meaning by giving things their names. His appearance is unusual and instantly recognizable. Most often, Thoth is depicted as a man with the head of an ibis. Why this bird? Watch an ibis walking along the banks of the Nile. It moves slowly and thoughtfully, as if immersed in contemplation. Its long, curved beak resembles the reed pen of a scribe, constantly searching, as if fishing truth from muddy waters. Sometimes, Thoth was shown in the form of a baboon, greeting the rising sun. The baboon was believed to possess secret knowledge of dawn. Thoth gave humanity his greatest gift, hieroglyphs. The Egyptians called them Medu Neter, the words of the god. Before writing, thoughts and events vanished like ripples on water. But Thoth taught humans to anchor speech, to turn fleeting words into eternal stone. Thanks to him, we can still hear the voices of people who lived thousands of years ago. Thoth is the Lord of time. He divided the year into seasons, months, and days. He watches the movements of stars and planets, recording their paths. He is the great mathematician of the universe, the one who knows the number of all that exists. There is a remarkable legend that reveals the cleverness and wisdom of Thoth. Long ago, the sun god Ra, angered by the sky goddess Nut, placed a curse upon her. He declared that she would not be able to give birth on any day of the year. At that time, the year consisted of exactly 360 days. Nut was in despair, for she carried within her the future great gods, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. She turned to Thoth for help. The god of wisdom did not argue with Ra and did not challenge him in battle. He chose to act with intellect. Thoth went to the moon god Khonsu and proposed a game of Senet, an ancient board game, something like chess. The wager was light itself. They played for a long time, moving pieces across the board of fate. And Thoth, through sheer intelligence, won game after game. In the end, he won from the moon exactly enough light to create 5 full days. Thoth added these 5 days to the calendar. The year became 365 days long. Because these days did not belong to any month, and were not part of Rea's cursed 360 days, Nut was able to give birth to her children. Thus, Thoth's wisdom outwitted the prohibition and allowed life to continue. This is why, in the ancient lunar calendar, the moon waxes and wanes. It gave part of its light to Thoth. Thoth was also regarded as the greatest magician, but his magic was not lightning and fire. It was the quiet magic of the word. The Egyptians believed to name a thing correctly is to gain power over it. Thoth knew the true names of all gods, demons, and objects. It was said that somewhere there exists the Book of Thoth, containing all the secrets of creation. Whoever reads it would understand the language of animals, see the wind, and command the heavens. But Thoth hid this book carefully, knowing that knowledge is an immense responsibility for which humanity was not yet ready. Among the gods, Thoth was always the reconciler. When Horus and Set fought, tearing the world apart with their feud, it was Thoth who healed their wounds. It was he who restored the eye of Horus, making it a symbol of healing and wholeness. He is the voice of reason, quieter than the cries of rage, yet always victorious in the end. Imagine him now. He stands in the night, bathed in soft silver moonlight. His reed pen scratches across papyrus, recording the history of the world. He is calm. He knows that chaos is only a temporary absence of order and ignorance, only a temporary absence of knowledge. Thoth teaches us the value of thought and learning. He reminds us that words can heal and words can wound, that the mind can find a way out of any impossible situation, just as he once found 5 days for Nut. In the presence of Thoth, the mind grows quiet. Thoughts stop racing and fall into orderly lines. Everything is written. Everything is accounted for. Everything is under the careful watch of the great scribe. Yet even gods have hearts. And even sages and creators can feel loneliness. In the next story, we will see how the fates of familiar figures intertwine. We will meet the aging sun god and learn how far he is willing to go to bring back the one who brought joy into his life. We move now to the tender and slightly sorrowful legend of Re and Hathor, and how the world nearly lost its beauty. We already know the greatness of the sun god Ra and the radiant beauty of Hathor. But their relationship in mythology is not only harmony, it is also a story of separation and reunion. This legend is known as the myth of the distant goddess, or the Eye of the Sun. Imagine a time when Ra ruled the world, yet his heart was weighed down by the burden of power. To be the sun is to bear immense responsibility, each day to give light, each night to battle darkness. In this endless cycle, Ra grew tired. He became stern, withdrawn. Hathor, who was his eye, his protector, the embodiment of his active force, felt that her warmth was no longer needed. She saw that the world had grown too serious, that gods and humans alike had forgotten how to rejoice. Offended by the coldness of her father and sovereign, Hathor made a decision. She left. She departed from the green banks of the Nile and traveled south into the distant Nubian desert. There, among burning rocks and wild sands, she transformed. From a gentle woman and tender celestial cow, she became a fierce lioness. With her departure, Egypt changed. The sun still rose, but its light was no longer gentle. It became harsh, scorching. Laughter vanished from the world. Music fell silent. Love faded. Flowers lost their fragrance. People walked with lowered heads. Life became mechanical, existence without joy. In the temples, silence reigned. The sistrums were quiet. Ra sat upon his throne, gazed upon the gloomy world. And then he understood the mistake he had made. He realized a great truth. Power without love is meaningless. Order without joy is lifeless. The sun god felt longing. He missed her laughter, her dance, her golden radiance that made life worth living. But how do you return an enraged goddess who has become a lioness? Force would not work. In her fury, she was stronger than any warrior. What was needed was wisdom. And so Re summoned Thoth, the very god of wisdom we have just met. Re asked him to go into the desert, find Hathor, and persuade her to return. Thoth took the form of a small baboon and set off on a dangerous journey south. He found Hathor lying upon a rock. She growled. Her eyes flashed like lightning. But Thoth did not fear her. He did not command. He did not threaten. He began to tell her stories. He spoke softly, gently, in a calm, flowing voice. He told her parables about how painful it is to be alone, about how her true home longed for her absence. He reminded her of the cool waters of the Nile, of sweet fruits heavy on the branches, of the songs people sang in her honor. He spoke of this truth, that her wrath was great, but her mercy was even greater. The words of Thoth were like a healing balm. Slowly, the fury of the lioness began to soften. Hathor remembered her true nature. She remembered that she was created for love, not for solitude in the desert, and she agreed to return. The journey home became a true triumph. As Hathor drew closer to the borders of Egypt, the world itself began to awaken. The desert blossomed. Wherever her feet touched the ground, birds began to sing. Rivers laughed and murmured with joy. And when Hathor finally entered Egypt, she once again took on her radiant form as the golden goddess. All the people came out to greet her. It was the greatest celebration the earth had ever seen. People danced, beat the drums, drank wine, and embraced one another. This festival entered history as the festival of drunkenness, but not drunkenness from wine alone. It was intoxication with life itself, with joy restored to the world. Re rose from his throne to embrace her. The solar disk and the solar eye were reunited. The world became whole again. Ra understood that even he, the king of the universe, needed softness, needed the inspiration that the feminine principle brings. This story is a beautiful reminder for us. So often we immerse ourselves in work, in duties, in routine, becoming like the weary ray. We convince ourselves that joy is something unimportant, something that can be postponed. But the myth of Hathor tells us, without joy, the world turns into a desert. Joy is a sacred force. If it leaves us, we must protect it, seek it, and use all wisdom, patience, and care to bring it back. And now, with divine harmony restored, with the gods once again ruling the heavens in unity of strength and love, let us move forward in time. We will pass from myths of gods to the stories of humans who believe themselves to be their children. We will speak of a woman who dared to place the pharaoh's crown upon her head and proclaim herself the direct daughter of Amun-Ra. We turn now to the great Queen Hatshepsut and the legend of her divine birth. Now that we have come to know the gods dwelling in celestial halls, let us step into the world of humans, but not merely into the world of mortals, into the place where the divine meets the earthly. In ancient Egypt, that meeting point was the pharaoh. The pharaoh was not considered an ordinary person. He was the living embodiment of Horus on earth, a bridge between worlds. But one ruler went even further. She chose to tell the world a story that made her very flesh and blood sacred. She was Hatshepsut, the great female pharaoh. In those times, the throne of Egypt belonged to men. To rule, Hatshepsut needed more than royal lineage. She needed a legend, and she ordered that this legend be carved into the walls of her magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahri. Imagine this temple. It is carved directly into golden cliffs on the western bank of the Nile. Vast sunlit terraces, colonnades casting cool shadows. If you step deeper into the cool stone halls, you will see reliefs telling an astonishing story. The story of theogamy, the divine marriage. It all began in the heavens. Amun-Ra, king of the gods, summoned a council. He looked upon Egypt and decided that the land needed a ruler who would unite wisdom and beauty, strength and mercy. He wished to create the perfect sovereign. Amun turned to the wise Thoth and asked, "Which mortal woman is worthy to become the mother of my child?" Thoth, knower of all secrets, replied, "There is a queen named Ammuz, the most beautiful of women. She dwells in the palace of Thebes." And so Amun-Ra decided to descend to earth. But a god cannot appear to a mortal woman in his true, blinding, fiery form. She would be consumed by his radiance. So Amun took on the appearance of her husband, Pharaoh Thutmose I. The legend describes this meeting with extraordinary tenderness and poetry. Amun entered the queen's chamber while she slept. But Ammuz awoke not to the sound of footsteps, but to a wondrous fragrance. The entire palace filled with the scent of incense from the distant land of Punt, myrrh, frankincense, and exotic blossoms. It was the fragrance of divine presence. The queen saw before her husband, yet he glowed with golden light. She understood that this was no mortal man, but the Lord of the heavens himself. Amun extended the Ankh, the symbol of life, and held it to her nose, granting her the breath of life. In that moment of silence and light, Hatshepsut was conceived. Amun revealed the future to the queen. "You shall bear a daughter who will unite the two lands. She will rule under my protection, and her name shall be Hatshepsut, foremost of noble ladies." But the wonders did not end there. Amun commanded Khnum, the creator god with the head of a ram, to fashion the body of the child. Imagine Khnum seated at his potter's wheel. In his hands is the clay of existence itself. The wheel turns, and beneath his fingers a tiny form begins to emerge. But Khnum shapes not one figure, but two. One is the body of Hatshepsut. The other is her Ka, her life force, her immortal essence. They are identical. Khnum works with love, bestowing health, beauty, and royal majesty upon the child. Beside the wheel stands the frog-headed goddess Hecate, stretching out the symbol of life, breathing into the figures the magic of animation. When the time of birth arrived, the gods themselves were present. Temple walls show goddesses supporting Queen Emos, spirits of the four directions welcoming the newborn. The infant girl, shining like gold, was presented to Amun. The god looked upon his granddaughter, lifted her in his arms, and kissed her, acknowledging her as his own flesh and blood. This story was not a fairy tale. For Hatshepsut and her people, it was absolute truth. It meant that when she sat upon the throne, Egypt was ruled not by a human, but by the daughter of the sun itself. Her decisions were divine decisions. Her will was sacred. Through this legend, Hatshepsut ruled for more than 20 years. It was a time of remarkable prosperity. Egypt did not wage war. It traded, it built, it flourished. Magnificent obelisks were raised. Expeditions were sent to bring incense and trees from distant lands. This story teaches us how belief can reshape reality. The myth of divine birth gave a woman the strength to rule an empire in a man's world. It transformed politics into sacred ritual. Imagine now that majestic temple cut into the living rock. The silence of the desert surrounds it, and on its walls, forever frozen in cool shadow, is the story of a night when a chamber filled with the scent of myrrh, and a god descended from heaven to gift the world a great queen. But times change. Empires meet new forces. Centuries after Hatshepsut, a conqueror came to Egypt who also sought proof of his divine nature. He came not from the Nile Valley, but from distant Greece. And to become a true pharaoh, he had to journey to the very heart of the desert. We now move to the story of Alexander of Macedon and his mysterious meeting with the oracle of Amun. Centuries passed. Dynasties rose and fell. The sands of time buried ancient temples. But belief in the divine nature of rulers remained unchanged. And then Egypt was entered by a man born far to the north, in the lands of Macedon. His name was Alexander. We know him as Alexander the Great, a brilliant commander who conquered half the known world. But when he stepped onto Egyptian soil, he sought neither gold nor battles. He sought confirmation of something he had felt deep within his heart all his life. He was searching for his heavenly Father. Alexander knew the story of Queen Hatshepsut and of the other pharaohs before him. He understood that to become the true ruler of Egypt, it was not enough to simply place a crown upon one's head. The gods themselves had to accept you. And so he made a bold decision, a dangerous and mystical journey. He set out for the Siwa oasis. Siwa is a secluded green island of life, lost deep within the Libyan desert, hundreds of kilometers away from the Nile. There stood one of the most revered oracles of the ancient world, the temple of the god Amun. Imagine this journey. Alexander and his small retinue left behind the fertile riverbanks and stepped into an endless sea of sand. The desert is a place where a person is left alone with eternity. There are no roads here, only direction suggested by the stars. The wind erases footprints behind you, cutting off the way back. Legends say that this journey itself became proof of Alexander's chosen destiny. When the water supplies were exhausted and the men began to suffer from thirst, the sky suddenly darkened. And in a land where rain may not fall for years, a downpour burst forth. Alexander drank the water, feeling within it a blessing. Later, when a sandstorm hid the sun and all landmarks disappeared, the travelers lost their way. It seemed as though the desert itself did not wish to let them reach the sanctuary. But then suddenly, two black ravens appeared in the sky. They circled above Alexander, calling loudly, beckoning him forward. They flew low, showing the path, and waited if the people lagged behind. That sacred order had been restored. Upon the throne now sat not a foreign conqueror, but the son of their chief god returned home. Alexander respected their faith. He restored their temples. He offered sacrifices to their gods. He became part of their myth. This story reminds us of the search for destiny. Alexander crossed the desert, overcame fear and doubt, to answer the question, "Who am I?" And the desert and the gods gave him their answer. Even the greatest conquerors need to feel a connection to something higher. After visiting Siwa, Alexander believed in his own invincibility, and that belief carried him to the very edge of the world. But the story of pharaohs closely bound to the gods did not end with Alexander. Long before him, during Egypt's greatest flourishing, there lived a ruler whose very name meant born of Ra, a ruler who reigned so long that it seemed he himself was the sun. We travel back to the golden age of the New Kingdom to meet a giant of history, Rameses the Great. Let us step back further in time, to an era when Egypt stood at the height of its power. Upon the throne sat a pharaoh whose name thundered across the world, and whose reign lasted so long that many Egyptians had never known life without him. This was Rameses II, whom history named Rameses the Great. His name, Ramesu, means born of Ra, and his entire life was proof of this fiery solar bond. The most famous legend of Ramesses is not connected to peaceful construction, but to a moment of mortal danger. It occurred during the legendary Battle of Kadesh. The Egyptian army clashed with the powerful forces of the Hittites. In the chaos of battle, Rameses found himself cut off from his troops. Enemies surrounded his chariot in a tight ring. It seemed that the end was inevitable. In that moment of despair, Rameses did not call for his generals. He turned to the one he considered his true father. Amid the roar of battle and the whistle of arrows, he raised his hands to the sky and cried out to Amun, "I call to you, my father Amun. I am here alone, abandoned by all. But are you not my father? Have I not built temples for you, filled them with offerings? Do not abandon me." And a miracle occurred. The chronicles say that the god heard him. Ramesses felt a hot wave of power fill his body. He sensed that he was no longer alone. "I am with you. I am worth more to you than hundreds of thousands of warriors," spoke a voice within his heart. The pharaoh, shining like the sun itself, rushed back into battle. The enemies, seeing this supernatural light and fury, fell back in terror. Ramesses survived and triumphed. He proved that the bond between God and king was not mere words, but a real force capable of changing history. To eternalize this bond, Ramesses ordered the great temple of Abu Simbel to be carved into the rock. 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh sit at the entrance, facing east, greeting the sunrise. But the true wonder lies within. The temple was designed with astonishing precision. Twice a year, on the pharaoh's birthday and on the day of his coronation, a ray of the rising sun pierces the darkness of the corridors. It travels 60 meters through solid stone and falls directly upon the faces of the statues in the sanctuary, upon Amun, upon Horus, and upon Rameses himself. In those moments, the stone pharaoh seems to come alive, ignited by living light. It is a moment of union. The sun touches its son, reminding the world that Rameses the Great and his divine father are one. From the grandeur of stone giants, we move to the final chapter of the ancient Egyptian rulers, to a woman who became a legend, not through the power of weapons, but through the power of intellect and magic. We turn to the story of Cleopatra and her embodiment of the goddess Isis. We approach the sunset of a great civilization. The age of pyramids and ancient dynasties was fading into the past. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Rome, young, ambitious, hungry for power, stood at the gates. At this moment, a woman ascended the throne whose name became synonymous with Egypt itself. Cleopatra. She was not merely a queen. She was intelligent, educated, and possessed an iron will. But Cleopatra understood. To save her country, she had to become something greater than human. She had to become a goddess, and she chose the image of Isis, the Great Mother, the Enchantress, the one who can gather what has been broken and make it whole again. Cleopatra did not play a role. She lived it. At ceremonial processions, she appeared in the garments of Isis, wearing the sacred headdress with the solar disk and horns. The people called her the new Isis. For the Egyptians, she was the earthly embodiment of the force that protects life and family. Her life became mysteriously intertwined with myth itself. Just as Isis wandered the world, searching for and saving her husband and restoring the kingdom, so too did Cleopatra travel, forge alliances with Caesar and Mark Antony, trying to preserve the independence of Egypt. In her struggle for the throne on behalf of her son Caesarion, people saw the reflection of Isis's battle for the rights of the young, Horus. She was a mother defending her child from chaos. Legends say that Cleopatra spent long hours in temples, turning to the goddess. In the silence of the sanctuaries, wrapped in clouds of frankincense, she searched for answers. It is said that Isis appeared to her in dreams, promising that the queen's name would not be forgotten as long as the world endures. "You are my vessel," the goddess whispered. "Your fate will be bitter like myrrh, but eternal like gold." The end of Cleopatra's life became her final and most powerful magical act. When all hope was lost and Roman legions entered Alexandria, Cleopatra refused to become a captive. She chose a death worthy of a goddess. According to tradition, she met her end from the bite of a venomous asp. But this was not merely suicide. Remember, the serpent Uraeus was a symbol of royal power and the protection of the god, Ra. The cobra on the pharaoh's crown spat fire at enemies. Cleopatra accepted this bite as a sacred kiss of eternity. She departed not defeated, but liberated. She believed that in that moment, Isis herself received her soul and carried it upon her solar bark into immortality. Thus ended the story of the pharaohs. But Egypt did not disappear. Its spirit, its faith, and its beauty continued to live on in stone, in color, and in memory. The story of Cleopatra closed the age of the pharaohs, but the myths of ancient Egypt did not vanish. They gained immortality in another form, in stone, gold, and paint. For an Egyptian, art was never mere decoration. It was magic. It was a way to make the invisible visible and the temporary eternal. Imagine entering an ancient temple, for example, Karnak. This is not just a building. It is a stone model of the universe at the moment of creation. You pass through massive pylons, the towering stone walls at the entrance. They symbolize the mountains of the horizon between which the sun rises each morning. You step onto the floor, which for the Egyptians symbolized the god Geb, the very body of the earth. High above your head, the ceiling becomes the sky, deep blue paint, golden stars, and soaring protective vultures. The immense columns supporting the vaults are shaped like bundles of papyrus or lotus. Walking between them, you are as if moving through the primordial reed marsh that rose upon the mound of Benben. The temple is a frozen myth of the creation of the world. Inside it, a person felt themselves within divine history. Look at the statues. They stand or sit in poses of absolute stillness. Their gazes are directed straight ahead into eternity. The Egyptian sculptor did not try to capture a fleeting emotion, a smile or anger. He carved essence. The statue was a vessel. Priests believed that the spirit of a god or the soul of a pharaoh could descend and dwell within this stone body. That is why statues were fed, washed, and dressed. They were alive. And the walls of tombs were not merely paintings. They were detailed maps. When an artist painted the solar bark or the field of Iru, he created reality for the deceased. Painted grain would never rot. Painted water would never dry up. Art guaranteed that even if the outer world collapsed, Inside the tomb mat, sacred order would remain forever. Colors carried meaning. Green was the color of rebirth, like a new shoot. Blue was the color of sky and water, the breath of life. Yellow was the color of gold, and gold was believed to be the flesh of the gods. Red was the color of blood, fire, and victory. Artists painted prayers with brushes, turning walls into portals to another world. Art made myth tangible. You could touch a column and feel the solidity of the earth. You could look upon a golden mask and understand what the radiance of a god looks like. But myths lived not only in majestic temples. They were dissolved into the simplest everyday things. They were in every home, every amulet, every word. We are approaching the end of our journey. Let us see how these great stories were woven into the ordinary lives of simple people, giving them hope and peace. We move to the concluding part, myths in everyday life. The grandeur of temples and golden masks may seem distant, but for an ordinary Egyptian, myths were as close as their own breath. They were not dusty stories from the past. They were the reality of every day. Imagine the morning of a simple person in the Nile Valley. Upon waking, the first thing he saw was the rising sun. For us, this is merely an astronomical event. For him, it was a personal victory. He saw Ra once again defeat the serpent of darkness. And that meant that he too, a simple human, could overcome his own difficulties today. Leaving his home, he touched the amulet around his neck. Perhaps it was a widget. The Eye of Horus, a small piece of faience or stone that held the warmth of the body. Touching it, the person felt protected. Just as it healed the eye of the god, so too would this amulet ward off illness and misfortune. Or perhaps it was a scarab. Watching the simple dung beetle roll its ball across the sand, the Egyptian saw in it a reflection of the sun's journey across the sky. In the small, he saw the great. The world around him was not silent. The bird in the sky, the rustle of wind in palm leaves, the flooding river, all of this was the gods speaking to humans. Every home had its own small altar. There were no golden statues there, but simple clay figurines. Bes, the comical dwarf protector, guarding children's sleep. Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess, helping women in childbirth. People shared their food and their worries with them. The gods were members of the family. All of life was threaded with the invisible line of Maat. When a farmer measured grain honestly, he knew he was making the world stronger. When a judge delivered a fair verdict, he repeated the actions of Thoth. When a person prepared for sleep, he rested his head on a special headrest decorated with protective spells, believing that even in sleep he rested in the palms of the gods. And before I wish you a peaceful night, allow me to speak of the immense influence that Egyptian myths have had on the cultural code of all humanity. We often think that ancient Egypt belongs entirely to the distant past, a closed chapter of history, frozen in museum displays and ruins amid the desert. But if we look more closely, if we listen to the rhythm of our own lives, we discover something remarkable. Egypt never disappeared. It dissolved into our world like sugar in water, becoming invisible, yet inseparable from our culture, our beliefs, and even our sense of time. We are the heirs of this great civilization, even if we do not realize it. Look at how we measure time. Every time you glance at a calendar, you see the legacy of Egyptian priests. It was they, observing the floods of the Nile and the movement of the stars, who first understood that the year lasts 365 days. This rhythm, by which all modern humanity lives, was set thousands of years ago in the temples of Thoth, and the division of our day into 24 hours. That, too, is their gift. We live in Egyptian time, in a rhythm they considered sacred. Look around our cities. When European kings or presidents of new nations wanted to display their power and grandeur, they turned to the language of Egyptian architects. Obelisks, those stone rays of the sun, stand today. in the centers of Paris, London, the Vatican, and Washington. For a modern person, they are merely monuments. But on a deep subconscious level, they remain the same ancient symbol of the connection between earth and sky. The pyramid, a symbol of stability and eternity, still looks at us today, even from banknotes, reminding us of the all-seeing eye, the ancient eye of Horus, the sign of divine awareness and cosmic watchfulness. Even in our most intimate spiritual images, we can see reflections of the myths of the Nile. When we look at ancient icons or paintings of the mother and child, art historians recognize the echo of ancient statues of Isis holding the infant Horus in her arms. This pose, full of tenderness and protection, this archetype of the Great Mother, has passed through millennia, changing names but preserving its essence. And the golden halos above the heads of saints are quiet reminders of the solar disk with which the Egyptians crowned their gods, symbolizing their radiant nature. Egyptian thought also shaped our morality. The idea that after death a person faces judgment, where good and evil deeds are weighed, was born on the banks of the Nile. Before this, the afterlife in many cultures was vague and uncertain. But Egypt gave humanity the idea of personal responsibility. The image of scales in the hands of justice is a direct descendant of the scales of Osiris and the feather of the goddess Ma'at. Even today, we believe that truth has weight and that conscience must be light. Even science carries. Egyptian roots. The very word chemistry comes from the ancient name of Egypt, Kemet, meaning the black land, the land of fertile silt. Ancient alchemists, searching for the philosopher's stone, considered themselves disciples of the god Thoth, whom the Greeks called Hermes. And the symbol that doctors still place at the beginning of prescriptions, some researchers connect it to a stylized image of the eye of Horus, a sign of healing and restored wholeness. And what about our psychology? Great explorers of the human soul, such as Carl Jung, found in Egyptian myths keys to our subconscious. The battle of Horus and Seth is the eternal struggle within each of us. The conflict between our conscious, luminous self and our shadow, our hidden fears and passions. The Egyptians taught not to destroy Seth, but to restrain him, to make his strength serve good, just as we learn to guide our emotions rather than be ruled by them. The story of Isis, who gathered Osiris piece by piece, is a metaphor for healing the soul. When grief or failure breaks us, we too, like the great goddess, must show patience and love to gather ourselves again, to become whole and be reborn. But Egypt's influence reaches even deeper, to where science ends and mystery begins. All Western mysticism, all esoteric traditions that fascinated thinkers from the Renaissance to today, stand on an Egyptian foundation. Remember Thoth, the god of wisdom we spoke of. In antiquity, the Greeks and Egyptians merged his image with Hermes, creating Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. Texts attributed to him formed the basis of Hermeticism, a philosophy that inspired Newton, Giordano Bruno, and medieval alchemists. When modern seekers speak of ancient wisdom, they are, in essence, echoing texts written in the shadow of Egyptian temples. Even the tarot deck, used today for divination, carries the spirit of Isis. Look at the High Priestess card. She is often depicted wearing a headdress with horns and a solar disk, the crown of the great Egyptian goddess. In the Middle Ages, mystics believed that tarot cards were not merely a game, but an encoded book of Thoth, lost wisdom saved by priests and transformed into images. Historians may debate this, but the aura of Egyptian mystery lives in every deck. And finally, Egypt left its mark not only on our minds, but on our faces. The aesthetic of this civilization proved immortal. Look at modern ideals of beauty. The famous winged eyeliner. That feline shape, giving a woman mystery and power, is a direct gift from Cleopatra and Nefertiti. The ancient Egyptians lined their eyes not only for beauty. The black pigment kohl protected eyes from the desert sun and acted as an antiseptic, warding off infection. It was a union of practicality and magic. Today, that Egyptian eye has become an eternal code of attraction. When a woman draws a black line along her eyelid today, she unknowingly repeats a ritual performed by queens thousands of years ago to become closer to the goddess Hathor. Ancient Egypt left us more than stones. It left us a cultural code, a set of symbols and ideas that help us understand life, death, power, and beauty. We still look at the stars as the priests of Heliopolis once did. We still seek harmony and order, as Matt taught. We still hope that love is stronger than death, as Isis believed. Myths did not die. They simply changed their garments, becoming part of our shared human heritage. And now, as you drift toward sleep, you can feel this connection. You are not just a listener of a story. You are a link in an endless chain of generations who gazed in wonder at the Milky Way, the backbone of the goddess Nut, and dreamed of eternity. Egypt is always near. In every hour of your day, in every search for truth, in every hope for dawn. And now, as we complete our long journey, allow yourself to feel the ancient Egyptian peace. We have traveled far. We witnessed the first mound rising from the silent waters of Nun. We felt the first breath of Shu and the cool moisture of Tefnut. We watched the sky separate from the earth, creating space for life. We sailed in the bark of millions of years with Ra, knowing that light always overcomes darkness. We mourned with Isis and rejoiced in the resurrection of Osiris, understanding that love is stronger than death. We weighed the heart on the scales of truth and found it light as a feather. Ancient Egypt left us its greatest treasure, faith that the world is ordered, that chaos is only temporary, and that order, beauty, and meaning are eternal. Now imagine that you are standing on the bank of the great Nile. Night has fallen. The sky above you is the body of the goddess Nut, strewn with countless stars. The river flows slowly, silently, reflecting their light. The desert breathes the warmth it gathered during the day. Here it is quiet. Here it is safe. The gods are in their places. Re sails in his night bark, guarding your peace. Bastet watches over your sleep. Anubis stands at the threshold of eternity. You no longer need to worry about anything. All stories are told. All battles are won. The world rests in the balance of Mat. Let this ancient calm enter your heart. Release your thoughts like birds into the sky. Let the current of the great river carry away all your worries. You are part of this infinite, wise, and beautiful universe. Sleep peacefully. May you dream of golden sands, turquoise waters, and eternal light. Good night, and until we meet again, my dear ones.